Yo, your production skills are so sick.
Thank you. I don't know where it all came from. Community, like that. It was really that, seeing yourself, like actually, it's like seeing people in those spaces doing the thing, and then like those credit lists, and you're able to see a name, and it sort of seems similar to yours, or you even know the person. I feel like it just comes down to really taking action from the top. Like a lot of us are continuing to push and trying to break down those doors, but we can only push them down so much until someone actually opens that or creates an opportunity that allows that to keep happening.
Welcome to the I Feel You podcast. My name is Eddie Wise, and I am your host. On this episode, we have a very special guest. Her name is Becky Mathai, and she is an up-and-coming Malayali American producer and music supervisor. Shy at times, Becky's music nerdiness eventually brought her out of her shell and right into the iconic Milk Boy studio, where she learned from some of the top engineers in her hometown, Philadelphia. She is currently the head of sync at Outer Voice Records and is an associate music supervisor at Racket Club. She has worked on campaigns with brands such as Instagram, Victoria's Secret Pink, BMW, and so many more. Her goal is to tell stories through music. Becky is committed to championing underrepresented composers and hopes to provide more sync education for BIPOC artists. On this episode, we speak on cultivating a trustworthy community, taking action to increase opportunities for South Asian creatives, and how sync can help creatives grow their career. Thank you so much for watching. Again, I really do appreciate it, and it means so much that you're here with us. If you're listening on Spotify, Apple Music, or Apple Podcasts, or any of the platforms there, thank you so much for giving us your time and listening to this episode. And without further ado, enjoy. Welcome to the I Feel You podcast, Becky. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, no, thanks for being a part of this. I appreciate it. We've been a fan since we met you, and we love your work, and we love what you did during the camp, and we're just super excited to sit down and talk with you. We know a lot's happened since then, and you've been pretty active, so it's just exciting to actually be able to ask you these questions finally. And then to all those watching, thank you for watching the podcast. Thank you for being here and listening. But yeah, speaking of the camp, that's when we were introduced to you, and we were doing a songwriting camp in collaboration with Element. It was Project Feel Element, and it's something called In Your Element, the documentary, and it's out on YouTube. For those who don't know, you can watch on this very same channel that you're watching now if you're on YouTube. And Becky was a part of that, and we had the pleasure and the honor of collaborating with her. And yeah, it was an incredible experience. We were all surrounded by so many like-minded creatives, and you spoke during the documentary a little bit about how important it was for you in that moment in your life to have all these creatives around you doing something similar to you, but that how important that collaboration was to you. So why do you think it's important as an artist to have that solid, trustworthy community, especially as a creative? Like, what does that mean to you?
Well, that's a really good question. I think, well, first of all, connecting with everyone at that camp, and originally the Element team was really cool. I think the timing of it was just, and I'd mentioned it to people definitely, of that wasn't feeling super creative, and it was at this weird point where, in the summer, everyone seems to be having the time to do all this stuff and be more creative and go out. I think at that time I wasn't feeling like that. So I think community was essentially that answer, and realizing it in the process of being in that camp was like, okay, I think a lot of us were coming out of isolation for a while during the pandemic, or the quarantine part of the pandemic. And I'm sure people in New York, for me back home in Philly. And I think exactly what I needed was just community and being around people. So doing the camp was such a breath of fresh air, because there was people from all walks of life doing all kinds of things, like, all around New York, or, wherever city they're from. So I think that was really encouraging, and hearing people either experiencing the same thing as me, or being in like the super cool mode where I could just see them like, wow, they're in their zone. I want to be like that. And it pushes you. So I think that's why I felt community, and still do. Community is really important, because you can lean on people when you're not like feeling like you're at your 100%, and maybe you can kind of like lean on others to sort of like, I don't know, I guess like help you get that back or kind of fill in those gaps that you feel.
For
So,
sure. Yeah, I mean, one of the things that Project Field talks about a lot, that we talk about a lot, and that saved a lot of us just in so many ways is community. That's such a massive thing for us, and it was so exciting to be able to do something like that. It wasn't the first time either. We had tried to do something similar to that before, and we were so affected by it, and it made us so happy. And it wasn't even something that was publicly released. And
oh wow.
just the experience alone was enough to keep us going and as creatives and push us in such a beautiful direction, everybody that was involved. And I feel the same way about the In Your Element camp. It was like, especially watching it back, because you kind of forget what happened
Yeah.
after a while,
Uh-huh.
and just naturally how your memory works. But to watch it all again was so fascinating, because everybody truly was in their element after a certain period of time. Yeah, it was like
Yeah.
so perfect, the title and the way, the energy that happened there. And especially for you, your production skills are
Ah,
so sick.
thank
Like,
you. I don't know where it all came from. Community, like that. It was really that, you know. It
yeah,
was fun.
I was gonna ask, like, what was it about production? How did you even get into producing music?
It's yeah, it's weird because growing up, I didn't really have a sense of what that meant. I come from a South Indian family from Philly. We kind of go deep here. Like, everyone's here, and really cool story. But also, no one really in music, so I didn't even know there was a pathway to be that person. That's like, you know, you don't really have a concept of what that even meant. So eventually, I got really into band, you know, kind of being a band kid.
Yeah,
And I like the person
I
and
was
the
a chorus
concept of being
kid.
able. There you go. So
Yeah,
you already
I
know.
was
So
a
you don't
choir
have to
kid.
speak
Yeah,
up. You're like, I was like a super nerdy like
yeah,
music kid, and I was just like, I really love what everyone's doing here. I might not know all the different instruments, all the different parts, but I'd love to like get to know everyone and figure out how I can incorporate that. And I think my band teacher, maybe a few friends, and me being a total music research nerd, started doing that and found that engineering and production was a thing.
wow.
So honestly, it started from just a genuine interest, but also I didn't really see many women of color
Mm,
that I could kind of look up to. I mean, there were a ton. There were some great people, and it has some cool stories on eventually meeting one of them, which was really cool. Of like
yeah,
one of the people who inspired me to do it. But that's how I got into it. It was just I was a musician who really was able to play instruments sort of in like a mediocre way, but I think I realized it's okay to be like decent at a few different instruments because
yeah,
producers kind of are the ones bringing it together. So that's how I
yeah.
got into it originally. So
Oh, that's so cool, and it's nice to hear that you did have someone that you could talk to that was similar to you, just in your identity.
yeah,
The next thing that I was going to talk about, yeah, because I was gonna ask, did you have someone that was there in your life that did something similar to what you were looking at doing, and you were able to look up to that person and follow in their footsteps? And it seems like you did have someone, but one thing that I did a bit of research on this because I was super curious, but I think it was recent statistics done. It was some of the more popular surveys done about audio engineering and production. I think it's 8% or 7% of the audio engineering people who are hired to be audio engineers. 7 or 8% of them are women, and
yeah,
the rest are men. And that's just in audio engineering. I think there is the study basically said that of the 10,000, I think, people who have jobs, legitimate jobs in audio engineering, 7% were women. And then when it comes to production, so like music production in the arts community, I think it's like 2 or 3% of them are
yeah.
women. And I didn't know it was that low. I had no,
Mm-hmm.
you naturally, because all of the producers that you see that are in the
Yeah.
mainstream or that are working there, it's always men, but that low. And I guess my question to you is, why do you think that is? Why do you think there's such a small amount of women in those communities?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good question because it's a culmination of things, and yeah, I think yeah, the statistics really low. And they started doing study. Yeah, it was just like that's what it is. It's
It's
way too
crazy.
low, and I'm glad that
Mm,
you were reading into it because I even did my, like, being myself a woman of color, you also do your own research wondering,
Yeah.
okay, why is it the case? And, there are those like really, reasons we can all assume and probably know too. It's just the system is essentially set up for a lot of people that look like us to not be able to climb and get to where, maybe a lot of our white coworkers or, people doing the same things as us are able to do, especially white men. Like in those studios, historically, that's usually been like more white men,
Yeah.
whether it's for like mixing for even like post production on TV film stuff or in the studios. Like when I was interning at a studio in Philly, I was really lucky to have met some people that had helped me along the way and looked more like me and understood that it was going to be tough. But I remember seeing it was mostly, not even in that studio, just in general, I started to see it was mostly white men that were leading those sessions. And I'm like, I think what it is, it's like people are so used to that you just kind of keep doing it. You're like, the people that are in power, of course, are going to keep that going. And then that's, it's like the cycle. So that's why it just keeps going and going like that, is because no one wants to break that and be like, hey, let's actually hire someone black or brown to oversee this department, and then that person has the opportunity to hire an engineer, a producer, or in any kind of case, whether it's corporate or really music, like music studio focus. So yeah,
and they will most likely always hire people that are similar to them, just
exactly,
because they relate to that person more, and they probably have some kind of connection.
There's so many things.
I mean,
it's like
it's multi there's so many variables, and I think one of the big things one of the bigger things that happen before anybody even gets interested is the exposure to it. I mean, even me, in growing up, I didn't even know, like I say this all the time, but I didn't know what theater was until
that's fair.
I saw a production, and I was like,
I
didn't even know this existed, right? They're especially because what it means to be an immigrant in this country, and then also or be a low income family. You just have your scope of exposure is so small, and the opportunities that you have to do different things. Like there's nobody in your families or in your immediate circles that are doing anything besides struggling to survive, right? And I think that for a lot of the communities that we're speaking on, because imagine it's only 2-3% are women, and then imagine the percentage of those women that are Southeast Asian, or Black or Latino, like so much smaller. And I don't think it's a part of those communities for like to see women as audio engineers or engineers in general, or like producers. So what's your opinion? How do you think we can improve and give more access and more resources and more opportunities for people that look like us?
I mean, it's hard when I think a lot of people ask that question. It's like, how do we change it? And it's tough because like there's the excitement of like, okay, this is things these are things we can implement. But I feel like I mean, I guess I'm not someone who could speak on it like at large, but I feel like it just comes down to really taking action from the top. Like a lot of us are continuing to push and trying to break down those doors, but we can only push them down so much until someone actually opens that or creates an opportunity that allows that to keep happening, versus like a few of us getting in and then it sort of just stays stagnant. So I think it definitely stems from those who are like in those decision-making positions, whether it's studio owners who get a chance to hire engineers if that's what someone wants to do, or A&Rs who are looking for producers for the artist to work with on a big project. And I know a lot of those statistics happen to do with like pop music, because that's where most of the money is also coming from too. And you're saying it's mostly men, and that's a problem, because then that stems down to equity and like actual payment and how much people are actually getting paid. So yeah, those are some things. I mean, it is frustrating because it's like I see for my younger self and still kind of figuring it out is like what was discouraging me, and a lot of times it was like sort of those barriers and people maybe not like realizing that it's because there's like not such a understanding previously coming into certain things, and maybe having some of those education gaps and needing a second to really grasp it. So I think it's definitely education, and it's like funding, and it's less unpaid internships too, a lot of those situations, because those are barriers too. Like personally, I had some support to be able to do that for a while, But I know a lot of people that couldn't do that, and that's why
can't afford it.
they couldn't take an opportunity that would have led to something. So
And a lot of those creative opportunities, especially in those record labels or
yeah,
where you're looking at, a lot of that starts with internships. A lot of it.
it does.
College educated kids getting those internships. And then so like imagine being low income, you got a scholarship, you finally made it to college, you want to do this specifically. Towards the end of your degree, you're trying to look for jobs. Everybody's looking for interns. Not only do you have student debt, because you're almost never getting a full ride, you also have to work full time, go to school full time, and then somebody expects you to work for free so that you can eventually have a job. There are so many barriers just in that small instance, because there are also thousands of kids who don't even get to college for something like that, or they find it too late in their lives, and they're like, I really like producing or doing this, but I can't really go to school right now, or they don't feel like they have the opportunity to go to school. But I guess, and this is where that conversation comes in, and people like you come in, because you have the opportunity to give those people who don't know resources, and to find those education centers that are willing to educate people like you and like us, and to find those labels that are willing to support an up and coming producer or artist in any kind of way. And I think that's super vital, and I want to thank you for being a part of that, because you're gonna be a part of that new wave, and you're gonna be pushing forward. And one day, I know it's gonna happen. One day, people that look just like you are gonna be looking to you for those resources, and you will be able to provide, and that's gonna be super exciting.
Yeah, I mean, I can't even. It's more, for me, it's always just about continuing to push the needle forward. And there's so many people that I'm inspired by. So the fact that you're kind of saying that for me is like, whoa, I don't know if that's that's it just yet, but like, I'm one of those sort of like, give flowers to people that, deserve them, especially the ones that helped me. And like, when I was at a place of like, there's not many people that look like me, found them. And, those are the people that push you. And that's why representation is so important. It's like not only seeing yourself, like actually it's like seeing people in those spaces doing the thing, and then like those credit lists, and you're able to see a name and it sort of seems similar to yours, or you even know the person, or it's like so many other factors. And I think it definitely starts with at least seeing yourself. That's a start, right? So
that's a huge part of it, representation. And I know that it's more difficult now than ever to have these conversations, because people want to critique pretty quickly because of the mainstream opinion about what that means. There's a kind of like a pushback on all of that stuff, but I think that it's important to have I know it's important to have these conversations, because there is a value to it, and it's incredibly important for these communities. And it's not just people wanting to take space just because they want the spotlight. This is important for our younger generations that see us and want to do what we do. We had a little bit of that conversation with Joshima and Shoshana.
I love Joshima.
Ode, shout out to Ode. But yeah, it's an ongoing conversation that we're always going to have. So a little bit on that topic in a similar vein, when it comes to your identity as a Southeast Asian. South Asian. Sorry. All right.
No, you're good. It's good you're asking. It's okay. It's good. I'm glad you're asking.
Yeah, specifically South Asian. Can you explain to the audience what is the South Asian diaspora, and how we're seeing a shift, but also how mainstream media still isn't getting how nuanced the community is at large? Can you kind of like bring us down that route a little bit, because I'm personally curious as well.
I'm glad. I think a lot of people have asked, and I talked to Josh as well. That's cool that you talked to her, because that's the conversation that comes up with friends like yourself is I think when it comes to South Asian diaspora, it's so large, and I think a lot of people assume India, and myself, I'm Indian, so it's like you kind of default to that because at least mainstream goes there. But I think it spreads so far. It could be like India, Pakistan. It could be, even to the West Indies and different places like Trinidad or Guyana or different places like that. And, people are all over the place. So those are places where, people are coming that are South Asian and from those communities. But, right now the diaspora is spreading everywhere. You could be essentially from anywhere in the world and have South Asian roots. So I think And I know I'm missing so many other, communities. It's hard to list it, but I mean, that definitely is important to be listing those, like Bangladesh and places that also get left out of those conversations too. But I think a conversation, yeah, it starts with like people understanding what it means. Because I'm glad that you're asking too, because some people might think we're Southeast Asian and they also have things they go through as well, and feeling like they have their own culture, kind of subculture almost too. So for South Asian diaspora right now, yeah, there's definitely this scene that people are trying to get an understanding of. You're seeing like, our communities are trying to do something similar to how like Latin music kind of came off, but it took so much longer, and there was a growth there that happened over time. I think we have to learn ourselves that it's going to take some time too, because similar to that genre, it's nuanced as well, and there's different regions and dialects, and people are starting to now appreciate that because of so many different artists popping up now that are like, before they would have just called it Latin music, and that's not the case. It's like there's so many, there's like reggaeton and all these other kind of stuff, and I think our community's learning from that too. So I do want to shout out communities like that are pushing for that, because we're able to take some of that and be like, okay, like we should also push for, if there's regional music from different places, that's just as important. So that's why it's kind of happening where it's just like, it's this slow kind of growth, because we're all trying to figure out what it is and not speak on behalf of like every community. It's like what we can speak on, and then try to keep pushing the community forward. So that is, I guess I would say, sort of what that South Asian diaspora is looking like. But then like music wise, it's still like figuring it out. And there's like artists popping up in America that people know that are just like general household names now that really help too, because people are able to like go to them and then find out, what they're doing too. So I know that was like a lot, but
no, I mean, the second part of the question was talking about how nuanced those communities are. And it just goes to show, just in your attempt to like elaborate, which thank you so much for sharing. I'm sure everybody learned something that they didn't know before.
Yeah.
But like just even in the attempt, it's like there's so many different communities that you would have to consider. And I like the relation you made to the Latin communities, because it's very, very similar. Yeah. Like people from DR and people from Puerto Rico, people there. I mean, all the South American, it's
so many.
It's everywhere, right? And there are only a few that really get the spotlight, that get highlighted more than others. And I think everybody has their opportunities to grow within, the mainstream, but also within their communities and other, branching out. And I'm really excited to see how that develops, because from, those Latin communities, it like you said, it's a really slow, gradual build. There's a lot of these artists that kind of make a lot of space for other artists. And then you have the generations kind of continue to overlap and get better and better and better. And then, a great example for us, for the Latin community, is that then you have an artist like Bad Bunny. And it's global, international phenomenon, one of the biggest artists to ever exist. And that's so odd, because it's a person who barely speaks English, doesn't make any music in English, is all, it's Puerto Rican. Like it's so true to my, roots and my community, and it feels really good. And I think that for the people who don't understand, there's a lot of people who don't understand what that's like. And I think that's kind of sort of where the disconnect is. They have always seen these people in media. They have always seen the biggest artists be their people. And when it's not, you don't know what you're missing. And then you see other people celebrating. You're like, oh my gosh, I wish I had that one person that I could like look to and be inspired by and be proud of and find my heritage in that. And I don't know, it's just so important.
Yeah. No, I love hearing you talk about that feeling you get from an artist that's just kind of gone beyond just what, stardom is, but it's like someone who's coming from your community, and that connection you feel. So I think that's definitely what South Asian diaspora is looking to do. And in some ways we've had opportunities, like Jalebi Baby has popped up. That was a big one that Tesher did with Jason Derulo, and that blew up, and it had this cool moment. I think people are realizing we want more of that, where it's like different kinds of versions of that, and people can continue to celebrate the community or not feel, like limited to one type of genre just because of their identity. A lot of people assume like South Asian artists want to do Bollywood music, and when I see that, I'm like, it's so different because Bollywood's a film industry.
That's film,
and
yeah.
And it's a massive one, and people don't even realize that's a whole other conversation as well. Gosh. And the nuances between like Bollywood and then where I'm from in South India, there's all these other, there's like Malayalam films and like Tamil films, Telugu films. Like there's all these different kind of communities. So that's similar to sort of the music too. You kind of reflect that to where the films and music. So I think, at large, the community is trying to get a good grasp at like how to make it work, because everyone's going to be doing it differently. And like making sure we continue to push those artists to get the opportunities, And
it's important to be connected as well, to know what's going on in those other communities so that you can collaborate and be, support each other, especially
100%.
if you're within that South Asian community. For the people who are watching, if you had to pick one South Asian artist that is your favorite, if you had to
get in trouble for there's so many cool artists. Well, I guess if I would just say I would say if you go with South Asian current, like some artists that are kind of breaking those barriers or kind of doing something different. Priya Ragu is an artist I'd really appreciate it. I don't know if you've ever heard of her, but she's a Tamil artist, and she Tamil Sri Lankan artist, and I think she also is from Europe, so she has all these different kind of these different influences, and she's just super dope. She kind of raps a little bit and sings R&B, Lauryn Hill style. Really appreciate her. And I think she's someone that is a prime example of embracing the culture and adding your spin to it, but also staying true to say if you like R&B and you like pop and you like rap, you're still able to do that too, So that's an artist I like.
Yeah, it's important to have that connection as well, because there are different genres as well. It's what is the genre of, because I'm from a place of complete ignorance, right? This is all new information to me.
That's okay. You're doing I'm genuinely asking.
Yeah. What is the genre of what you would consider South Asian music?
That's a tough one.
Because I'm sure there's a few, because we have we have reggaeton, we have bachata, we have merengue. There's a bunch of different types of genre, but what's yours?
Well, I guess I'm not the right person to speak on it. Here's the history lesson.
I would not be able to tell you any history on.
Yeah, no, right. It's when someone asks, you're wait, but I would say, because when I'm thinking about it, there's so many different kinds. If you think of region, if you have to actually think of the origin, where we all come from, the diaspora actually comes from, it's there's so many different styles, but now it's becoming so more diversified in terms of it could be very authentic, I don't know, Carnatic music, which is the traditional style. People are classically trained and things like that, in more South India and things they have a very unique sound, and that's very traditional, and it's not super there's a lot of tablas and a lot of rhythmic stuff, and you've probably heard the vocals are very, very and almost I'm trying to ethereal, and it has this longing kind of quality. I'm not classically trained, so I can't describe it. But I know so many amazing vocalists. Thank you. I know so many vocalists that are classically trained, and now they're doing R&B because they found the link. An artist that I help, Anusha Savi, it's her artist name. She's one of the artists that I help on the record label that I help run, and she's really dope because she's classically trained and she's sort of channeling it into pop and R&B stuff. So it's a really cool thing where it's not really a genre yet, but it's you're doing Carnatic style and you're using traditional styles and then bringing it into R&B and pop. So I think if that kind of gives you an idea, it's where a lot of us are coming from, whether it's America and coming from different places. For me, being in Philly, grew up with a lot of R&B and hip hop and things like that, so that will always sort of carry me through in the way I approach stuff. But then also being Indian, and being Malayali, which is my family's from Kerala, which is the southern part of India. We have our own culture and our own food and our own language. So that influences it well. So I think to kind of give you that long story, it's I don't even know if I could categorize it, but it's there's so many kinds. People will speak for themselves for if they're from that community. But I think, there's just a long list. So that's probably why it's taken a while, because you're okay, for all of us to kind of break off. It's like, how do we bring this all into
Yeah.
something that can be sent to the world? So
Yeah, exactly.
that is sort of my attempt.
No, it's
to
great.
describe
And
it.
it just keeps, you continue to add on to the important narrative that that this is very, very nuanced. These communities are very
Yeah.
nuanced, and you cannot paint
And like
these
speak
communities
for
with
everybody.
you can't paint it with a broad brush,
Yeah.
which seems to happen in mainstream media all the time. And I think that we will get to the point where it's a little more nuanced. I think with how education develops and how the internet develops and how we can, like, when we get the correct representation of all of these communities, I think that people will be more knowledgeable, and will be better with not assuming. So hopefully that does get to the point, and
Yeah.
nuance is hard, but it's very
I
important.
know we're using that word. That's like our word today. We're all nuanced.
Listen, it's a great word.
It is.
Sometimes it kind of is a bit of a gap, is a bit of like a hard stop, but I think that it's really important when you want to push conversations forward. So like I'm glad we're using that word. We spoken on a previous episode, like we mentioned before, with the co-founders of Ode, Joshima Shushana, who are also striving to uplift South Asian creatives as well as any creatives of immigrants regarding offering equitable opportunities. And you also strive to create equitable opportunities for brown and black creatives as well. So what does it mean to you to make equitable opportunities for these communities, and what actions can be done to move along more action?
Dang, you're asking the hard questions.
Listen, I'm coming with the hard balls.
You're coming through. No, it makes me think, because that's really valid, because like, how can we make it better? But I would say like equitable, at least for me, learning that in the past, few years, and like growing and understanding, it's like people talk for a while, it's like, equity, and then there's like equality, and how like equitable opportunities, it's like everyone sort of getting the opportunities that they need in that point of their life to get to like a similar place. Not everyone's starting from the same starting point. So how do you make sure everyone gets to where they need to go? Yeah. Even if it's in a different way, it's like at least they can still get to that same point. So I think, when talking about equitable opportunities, it's like you were talking about earlier, if someone comes from a lower income background but wants to do something similar to maybe this other like hedge fund type kid who will easily get to that point because they're whoever will know someone, and boom, they're there. It's like, how do you create an opportunity for this kid over here to have just the same, well, not the same, like, get a similar opportunity that can afford them the way to get to that same point. And it's tough, because there are people that are going to get there so much quicker, because like the nature of the way the system is, it's so embedded into our fabric of the country here, at least in America, and other places too. It's just like, and so embedded, where if these people have historically had the money and resources, they'll just keep getting there, and and pushing down the people that generally want to work for it, or generally just like can't get there because of the barriers that are continuing to be put in front of them. So I don't know. I think that's definitely tough to sort of solve, and for me to solve, but it's something I definitely want to help, because I think when talking about engineering and production, and like why it was tough for me, I can like think through what were some of the things that were tough for me, what weren't, because maybe I had certain privileges, and there's someone else that looks like me but then had a problem that would prevent them from getting what I was able to do. So I think whether it comes to like paid internships, that's definitely something that would create sort of that equitable opportunity, where if someone can do it for free, because of their connections, and then someone can't do it, at least this person can get paid to do it. And have maybe, like stipends or ways to like make it happen, so they can get that same opportunity. So I think, unpaid internships, there's so many discussions around it, but I think that could be a huge one that people will just have to try to think through and make it happen. And I think discussions with people who are actually, like I said earlier, decision-making positions. I was talking to someone else earlier, like, sometimes we forget it's like about those people high up, even if they're not like individually connected to the creative or to the technical, that person's calling the shots at the end of the day. So it's like, getting opportunities to meet with some of these people, whether it's like you were saying, more black and brown creatives and business owners, getting to meet with those people. Excuse me. And I think those would be really great opportunities. And again, it's easy to say, like, let's get that to happen. And I think there's people that you probably know, or you yourself, it's like you actually have these tangible ways, whether it's setting up meetings or somebody who can set up a meeting, is definitely important. And I look up to a lot of like organizations I've seen, like Gender Amplified, really dope organization. And they're also trying to create equitable opportunities for women and non-binary folks who want to get into engineering and production.
Wow, that's great.
So those are those organizations I look to because they're really trying to find ways. I think sometimes it's tough because you want to do it yourself. Like for me, I'm like, I want to like there's so many things I want to do, but I realize there's certain things I don't know. So I can't be the one to speak up on it. So who's somebody who can, and then give them that chance, like whether it's funding for these organizations or discussions they can have with executives at labels and get in those meetings they otherwise wouldn't have.
For sure.
Because it starts from the top. So
yeah,
I would definitely say those are some ways. I know there's so many others. But those are some definitely great steps.
And those are yeah, like you said, those are great steps. I think that it takes so many forms, so many shapes. The concept of equitable opportunities, it's a difficult one, but I think that we've had different forms of that conversation for so long now. I think we're starting to figure it out a little bit more, especially with the more private companies that come out that have that goal of getting people in the door. The more that we have that competition, and that market force pushing that forward, I think that it's going to help us come up with more innovative ways to make that happen and to give more opportunity across the board.
Like discussions, definitely. It's like you just keep engaging in it, and I think then the next step is action. A lot of times I know in the past couple years, there is a real strive for discussions around representation beyond that, and also just when people are talking about race in this country, a lot of times there's just so many things people just don't want to talk about because it's we haven't talked about it in schools before, or I think people are scared to talk about what's going on in the country just genuinely happening, and I think if people can address that more, but then also find actionable steps or not create barriers to not be able to take actionable steps when it you could talk so many and so on about a lot of the issues that are preventing these things, but I think just more discussions and being open.
Yeah, and then I'm glad you're big on action, because like the steps that you have to take, like it's nice when you can talk about it, right? It's nice when you can mention that there is this issue or tweet about it or whatever, put it on your Instagram story. But there are things that we can do. And oftentimes I feel like it feels so far away. It feels like something that you can't change because it's such a massive problem, right? It's so big. And I think that people have a hard time engaging with the massive structures that exist. But it starts with action. Like we have to do something, right? And like you said earlier, there are examples of where it worked, and you can look to certain communities where it is working actively, and they did certain things and it worked out for them. And I think that we can emulate that and try to push that forward as well. One thing that you talk about a lot, or it seems like this is one of the opportunities that you want to provide the most, but you're working with Outer Voice Records, right? And they also have they're a label that aim to also uplift South Asian creatives, and you're currently working with them on building, I think this is still happening, but building like a sync division essentially. Which is really cool for people who don't know what sync is. We're going to get into it. Don't worry about it. But it's with all the knowledge that you've acquired along the way with sync and just, engineering and production, what are some of the misconceptions that you often see when it comes to sync, and how can creatives get into sync and use it to grow their career?
I think it's been cool for me, at least in the past couple of years, being now in the sync industry, more music supervision stuff. I realized and just saw, and I know yourself being an artist too, you see the payouts for Spotify. Like I don't even want to like bring it up for you too, because that's a touchy, because it's like
$4 for like 1,000
yeah.
streams or something like that.
Yeah,
Not
and
even.
you put so much time. Like your music's amazing too. So shout out to you
Oh, thank
and all the producers and everyone you work with as well. But I think
Thank you.
you put so much time and effort, and a lot of these are personal stories, and then all of a sudden pay out for anything, Spotify or royalties and things that you should probably be making more for, but the big guys are taking all the money. It's just like a tough thing to just sit with. So I was always thinking like, this is why there's a lack of equitable opportunities too, is because like we're now shifting towards like distribution through Spotify and streaming, and then because it's so accessible to people, it's just like they just created this thing where the artists themselves aren't making money. So with sync, there's different issues with sync too, because with everything it's like stuff that needs to build. But the thing I loved is the artist can be like involved in the process, but also make us, there's sync fees involved when you get a placement, and then on top of that you can get royalty collections from whether it's a TV show and collecting from those, or if it's an advertisement, because I work mainly in advertising right now, and that's something too, you can make money from broadcast or streaming and all that kind of stuff. So I learned like it's the misconception though is that you can make a ton of money. I don't think it's that. I think you have to put a lot of effort, maybe invest into it, but I think that a lot of people are able to create opportunities for themselves because they take time on it, and they work on music that can be worked on for film, TV, advertising, things like that. So yeah, those are a few misconceptions, but the good thing is there are ways to actually make money.
Yes.
And if you're not making money from the streams, you can put some of the energy towards finding a sync rep, or whether it's someone on your team that's pushing for you and pushing for music and pitching it to supervisors. You can at least maybe get try to work towards a few syncs a year, and really gear up to whether it's just like recognize that, or like get like recognizability on like TV shows, and then someone's like, oh, you were on the new episode of this thing, and you see your streams go up. So there's so many cool things, but the misconception though is that it's like the answer to all things, but it's still an answer to a few. So I would say that's sort of things I would say.
A few of the things that you mentioned when it comes to why it's not like everything, why it can be super helpful, but it's not. It's not gonna like save you. One of the big things is that and I've seen this firsthand with the friends that do have sync opportunities. Sometimes you don't get paid for months, straight up.
Yeah.
Like and you have no idea when that ad is going to be sent out. You have no idea if you're going to be like, sometimes if you are making royalties, it's hyper dependent on just how that ad does, and then there are so many variables. And although it's great because you do get paid for the work that you do, even if they choose your track, sometimes they, depending on the agreement that you have, or if you're working with the right people, they will pay you just to ideate, just to show them some stuff. And if they don't take anything of yours, they still paid you for your time. So those opportunities do exist, although they're a little bit harder to get. They still are there, and there are so many companies now, and a lot of them are, even some small to medium-sized businesses are getting onto that game, where they're understanding that if you have a good track behind you, it really does change the trajectory of your business. It can influence it heavily. And I think that artists are valued a little more there, and they're starting to be valued more and more. And I think those opportunities are opening. And then there's some innovators within the communities that are finding ways to do it even better, and to make it so that, all the progress that has been made in sync continues to move forward. Because like you said, although it's not perfect, it's way better than spending hours and hours and hours on your personal music and, seeing nothing for it. And I think that, and also just, I don't want to discourage anybody either, because there is a balance, right? And we need people to be making personal music. We can't have all the artists suddenly become sync artists, because
it would change. Right? It would change too much.
Exactly. So there's definitely a balance, and it's something meant to supplement, right? As a person who wants to direct films and do what I do, or act as well, videography and doing that work is something that supplements my creativity and makes it so that I can do it more. And I think sync is an opportunity to do that for musicians that I feel like wasn't really there, or wasn't really accessible before, and now I see it being more accessible than ever.
Yeah, that's the big word, accessibility. I think for me, learning these past couple years now, like being in it, yeah, having conversations with other, folks of color that are in our space. It's definitely limited. There's not many people that look like myself in the space, but it's a cool opportunity to be there. But then the conversations being had are, checking all the artists that are getting placed, and also getting original composition, scoring opportunities. It's the same,
Yeah.
same thing you're seeing in the music industry, same thing. It's so, primarily, white artists, which is, a lot of times in sync, it's whatever the director wants, and it's whatever the editing team, whatever's working. It's all about the track that works for it. At the end of the day, it's like this project like needed that track because it was really what would support it, because the music's always like the supporting cast, or it's part of that kind of the supporting cast of like a whole project. It's like it's supporting what the plot and what's going on screen. It's supporting the dialogue. It's not necessarily always like this front and center unless it needs to be. And so that's something I love about sync, is that you can kind of, because naturally I am someone who's more behind the scenes, but being able to like shine a spotlight on like some of these more BIPOC artists that have not historically been able to get sync opportunities, and also those payments up front too. And like you were saying, yeah, there's like delays in the payment. There are those issues, and that's a whole other conversation, because I agree there
That
are
we've had
issues
before,
there.
yeah.
Yeah, but the cool thing is for sure education. I think that's something that's important to me. Education for people who, historically have not gotten those opportunities. That's a huge barrier, because if you don't know the best way to approach a music supervisor, or the best way to find a sync rep or a publisher, or if you don't know how to tag your tracks, the metadata, I had to explain to people. And
Oh man.
once I've got a grasp of metadata, they're like, what is that? And I'm like, that's the way your music will have a little more of a chance. You can increase your chance of a placement because of how easy it's to clear, or how easy it is to find the rights holders on your track. So there's so many things that go into it, but I think education, it definitely, just like everything else we were talking about, and I'm sure you would say the same thing, it's like education and accessibility. It starts there, and then we'd be able to see more people represented in these sync opportunities once the education is there, and people, the barriers sort of starts lifting, and people can like pitch their music out, or get more knowledge around like registering your music with the pro, or registering yourself with the pro, and what that means. And so there's so many things, but sync can do some really cool things for people. That's what gravitated me towards that, as opposed to where I was heading before. I realized there's a real cool opportunity I have to try to do something through sync.
And I'm glad you're doing it, because it's very exciting. And shout out to the few other companies that I know that are, providing that space for artists that they personally know to have that opportunity. A lot of my friends are able to do sync opportunities because there was someone who was like, I love your music and I want you to be a part of this group, and I am willing to be the person in between you and those, music supervisors, or those big companies, or those production companies, and speak on your behalf to get you in the room. And there are people that need to do that more often. And I want to show respect for all those people that do. If you're watching, you know who you are. So yeah, shout out to them. And shout out to you, Becky. Thank you so much for doing this, being here, talking about all of that we talked about, and, sharing your knowledge and your personality and your energy. We really do appreciate it.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Man. It's really, really cool. I'm not used to being interviewed, but it's cool to just talk about stuff. And also knowing you too, it's like, it's cool to have more of a discussion thing. I'm sure like probably get a range of the way discussions lead, but it just felt like a conversation with friends. So
I'm glad. Hey, that's what we're here to do. That's what we want to make it feel like that all the time. So thank you for sharing. To end us off, first thing, how can we support you in the best way that we can? And then 2, some words of wisdom if you have any.
Dang. Okay. Well, it's ways to support me. I'm not one of those people to like plug and follow me, but if you are interested in just like want to reach out or anything, like any ways I can help, you can follow me on Instagram at Mathai, or and reach out that way. I'm always down to chat with anyone. And then also some of the stuff I'm doing with Outer Voice, so feel free to follow Outer Voice Records. Doing some great things in the works now with some sync pub opportunities, and trying to do some stuff in my own lane too, in the music supervision world, and placing music into film, ads, TV, all that kind of stuff. So some ways of support. And then words of wisdom.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's always hard to find like a little one word thing. I'd say, well, I was talking big on like action and like taking action for things. So I would say, you know, there are a lot of times you say like if you don't see yourself or if there's, kind of be that person that you kind of wished you had or wish you saw. So, for me, even though I'm pretty early on in my journey, there's so many other things I want to do and I'm learning. It's like at least if I can be, or if a person can, or if I can be someone that someone's able to see and think they can do it, continue to strive to be that person. If you're not seeing yourself somewhere, just it's it's easy to say that and it's easier said than done, but there's most definitely somebody out there that could use yourself. Even if, I'm always a person that's like trying to figure it all out and all that, but even with all that baggage and all that kind of stuff, figuring it out, someone will still appreciate it. So yeah, I would say that's some whatever words of advice I could offer. But yeah, there's so much work to be done in terms of representation and all that. But if there's something you can do about it, definitely take those steps and try to find ways and find people who care just as much.
Beautiful. That was perfect. Yeah. Be who you want to be, who you need in this world.
Yeah. You made it into a phrase.
That's like that.
Be who you need. Yes.
That's great though. But I appreciate you being here, Becky. Thank you to everyone watching as well. I appreciate you being here and sharing this space with us and this energy. You heard her. Follow, support, and yeah. I don't know why I took my hat off for the last second. I was so good. Okay. My hair's all crazy.
It's all right. It's like matching with the fit. I just
flashed it. No. Anyway, no. Again, thank you so much. I appreciate it, and thank you, Becky. Thank you.
Thank you.